The sound of laughter grows louder, more taunting. It's followed by a sharp metallic screech. A single drop of crimson liquid falls into the clear blue water. The laughter vanishes. The water ripples, blood blossoming into a dark cloud. A terrified scream echoes, followed by a profound, suffocating silence. The sun was a merciless hammer on the Lakeside Estates community pool, and Karen held the clipboard like a shield. She was its self-appointed guardian, its last bastion of order against the encroaching chaos of summer. For the last 2 weeks, a war had been brewing, and its front line was the concrete perimeter of the pool deck. The enemy was a small, shifting battalion of teenagers, led by a girl named Maya. Maya was everything Karen was not, a kaleidoscope of motion, a vortex of noise and light. She wore a fluorescent pink bikini that defied the modest swimwear-only rule in the association handbook. Her hair was a wild, sun-bleached mane that she shook free of its bun and let tumble into the water, each droplet a glittering two-fingered salute to the hair-tied back policy. And she laughed. Oh God, she laughed. It was a sound that grated on Karen's nerves, a high, musical peal of pure, unadulterated defiance that felt like a personal affront. It was the sound of a universe that had not yet learned its limits, and Karen was determined to teach it. Her crusade began innocently enough. On day one, she'd approached Maya's group, her voice a precise, clipped instrument. "Excuse me, the pool is for swimming laps, not for horseplay. The handbook explicitly states..." Maya, sprawled on a towel with her sunglasses pushed up on her forehead, had not even bothered to sit up. "It's a community pool, Karen, not the Olympics." "Chill out," the other kids had snickered. One of them, a lanky boy named Leo, had mimed a salute. "Aye, aye, Captain." Karen's face had tightened. It was the first time they had called her by her first name, a brazen act of familiarity that stripped her of her authority. She was not Mrs. Henderson, a respected member of the community. She was just Karen, a title used in hushed tones and then, as their rebellion grew, with open mockery. The next day, Maya had brought a giant inflatable swan, a garish white creature with a golden beak. It was an instant hit. Karen had watched from the shade, her jaw set, as 3 teenagers piled onto it, the swan dipping precariously, threatening to capsize. This was a clear violation of the no flotation devices larger than 3 feet in diameter rule. She'd walked over, her shadow long and severe across the bright concrete. "Get that monstrosity out of the water now," she'd commanded, her voice thin with frustration. Maya had looked at the swan, then at Karen, and then she'd laughed. It was a soft sound at first, a little puff of air, but it had grown, blooming into a full, throaty guffaw that the other kids had joined. They had laughed at the swan, at Karen, at the very idea that a piece of plastic could be considered a monstrosity. In that moment, Karen felt it not just as a challenge, but as a personal humiliation. They didn't see the danger, the potential for a child to get trapped underneath, the way it blocked the view of the deep end, the way it simply didn't belong. They only saw her, a figure of fun, a woman who cared too much. She had tried to get the HOA to back her. "The rules are in place for safety," she'd argued at the last meeting, her voice shaking with righteous fury. Mr. Johnson, the HOA president, a man who believed in minimum effort for maximum peace, had simply shrugged. "It's just a swan, Karen. Let them have their fun." "Until someone drowns," she'd retorted, and the room had fallen awkwardly silent. Everyone knew Karen was still grieving. 2 years ago, her 10-year-old nephew, Ben, had nearly drowned in a neighbor's pool. He'd survived, but Karen, who had been poolside watching a moment before, had never fully recovered. The near tragedy had hardened her, turning her into a zealot for safety, a prophet of the worst-case scenario. To her, the rules weren't just about order. They were a form of penance, a way to ensure that nothing like that ever happened again. But the HOA, the same people who had brought her casseroles and hugged her at the funeral, had grown tired of her crusade. They saw a grieving aunt. The teenagers saw a monster. Today was the crescendo. Maya had upped the ante with a portable speaker, the bass thumping a steady, hypnotic beat. The music was a loud, pulsating heart in the quiet community, a sonic violation of the no loud music policy. Karen had stood at the gate, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the handbook on her tablet. She had found a new weapon, the chemical balance and contamination clause. It was a niche rule designed for dealing with rogue algicides or pool salt levels, but its wording gave her an idea. She'd called the HOA's maintenance supervisor, a weary man named Frank, and told him she'd witnessed a foreign substance being introduced into the water. Frank had sighed, but he had to check it out. When he arrived a few minutes later, the music was blaring. Maya and her friends were dancing on the deck, their movements loose and carefree. Karen walked up to them, her face a mask of triumph. "You're all going to have to get out of the pool," she announced, her voice rising over the music. "Frank here is going to run a test for foreign substances." Maya paused her dancing, the smile slowly slipping from her face. She looked at Frank, who was already shaking his head, a silent apology. "Foreign substances? Karen, what are you even talking about? Spilled drinks, lotions, food particles? I've seen it all," Karen said, waving a hand vaguely at their cooler. "It can throw off the pH balance. We don't need an algae bloom, do we?" Maya's eyes narrowed. "You're seriously doing this?" Her voice was low now, the laughter gone. It was replaced with something hard and cold. "You're making up some bullshit rule just to ruin our day?" "It's not made up. It's in the handbook, Section 4, subsection C," Karen said, her chin jutting out. "It's about safety." "It's about you," Maya shot back, taking a step forward. "This is about you and your stupid rules and the fact that you have nothing else to do with your life." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. The laughter was one thing, the flouting of the rules was another, but this was a scalpel to her carefully constructed reality. She wasn't just a protector of the pool. She was a protector of a memory, of a moment in time when she had failed to protect her nephew. This wasn't just a pool. It was the site of her last stand against her own grief. "I'm doing my job," Karen said, her voice shaking. "Your job is to be a miserable old hag," a boy from the group muttered. He thought it was a whisper, but in the sudden, tense silence, it felt like a shout. The other kids snickered. The sound of their laughter, that mocking, careless sound, filled the air again. It was a wave that washed over Karen, drowning her. She felt the hot rush of blood to her head, a pulsing rage that blurred her vision. Frank, sensing the moment was about to go sideways, took a step back. "Look, Karen, there's no foreign substance." "I'm leaving. Everybody, just chill." But Karen was beyond chilling. She saw the laughter on their faces, the contempt in their eyes. She saw the phantom swan, the forbidden music, the wild, free-flowing hair, and she saw them all as a personal affront. They were laughing at her rules, at her pain, at her, and it had to stop. In her purse, she carried a small, multi-purpose tool. She used it for pruning roses, for opening stubborn packages, and for snipping the occasional rogue thread from her clothes. It had a small, sharp blade for cutting and a screwdriver head. It was her tool for creating order. Her fingers, fumbling, found it. "You won't laugh at me anymore," she said, her voice a low, strangled rasp. Maya's friend, a girl with thick brown hair named Chloe, laughed the loudest. "Oh my God, Karen, what are you going to do? Tase us with your clipboard?" Karen didn't answer. She opened the blade. It was small, a utility blade no bigger than a thumbnail, but it glinted in the afternoon sun. Maya stopped laughing. The smile on her face slowly evaporated. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear finally replacing the contempt. "Karen, put that away," she said, her voice a plea. But Karen couldn't. The laughter had built to a crescendo, and she couldn't see anything but the sound. The blade was an extension of her frustration, her humiliation. She lunged forward, not with the intention to kill, but to silence, to mark, to prove that her pain was real. She meant to slash the giant inflatable swan, a symbolic attack on their source of joy. But in her rage, she misjudged the distance. The blade meant for the plastic found skin instead. There was a gasp. Chloe's hand flew to her leg, a small red line appearing just below her knee. For a moment, she just stared at it as if she couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. Then the line bloomed, a dark, pulsing well of blood. The laugh that had been building in Chloe's throat died. A single choked sob escaped her lips. The portable speaker fell from Maya's hand, hitting the deck with a muffled thud. The thumping beat went silent. One of the boys shouted, but the sound was swallowed by the sudden, terrifying lack of noise. The birds in the trees stopped singing. The gentle buzz of the pool pump was all that could be heard. The world held its breath. The laughter was gone. The HOA was silent, and Karen, with the small, gleaming blade in her hand, finally, terrifyingly felt heard. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on the humid air. The gentle buzz of the pool pump was the only sound, a mechanical heartbeat in a world gone still. Chloe's hand, slick with blood, trembled as she held it away from her leg, her eyes wide and unblinking. The small, thin cut, no more than an inch long, pulsed with a dark, rich crimson. It wasn't a gaping wound, but it was a declaration. It was the final, terrifying punctuation mark on Karen's righteous fury. Maya was the first to move. The shock that had frozen her vanished, replaced by a fierce, primal instinct. She knelt instantly, her voice cutting through the stupor. "Chloe, sit down. Sit on the deck." Her hands, steady despite the tremors in her soul, pressed a towel from the cooler to the wound. "Don't look at it. Just press down." "It hurts," Chloe whispered, a single tear tracking a path through the grime on her cheek. "I know. It's okay. Just keep pressure," Maya said, her eyes locked on Karen. The mockery and defiance were gone, replaced by a blazing hatred so pure it felt like a physical heat. Karen, standing a few feet away, held the utility blade in her hand. It felt impossibly light, like it belonged to someone else. She saw the blood on Chloe's leg, and a small, dizzying wave of triumph washed over her. "See?" she thought. "See what happens? This is what you get for not listening." The logic was twisted, warped by her grief and rage, but in that moment, it was her entire world. The laughter was gone. The chaos was gone. Only silence remained, and she was its author. A boy named Ethan, pale and shaking, fumbled for his phone. "I'm calling 911. No!" Karen's voice was sharp. The triumph soured, replaced by a cold, crawling dread. She saw the world through a new, terrifying lens. A small, self-contained victory had just expanded uncontrollably into a public, irreversible disaster. "It's just a scratch. A little cut. Just put a bandage on it." But Frank, the maintenance man, had seen it all. He had been a silent witness to Karen's escalating paranoia and the teenager's escalating mockery. He looked from the blood on Chloe's leg to the small, glinting blade in Karen's hand. He pulled out his phone, his weathered hands moving with a swift purpose. He wasn't calling an ambulance. He was calling the police. "Frank, wait!" Karen pleaded, her voice cracking. "It was an accident. They were taunting me. They wouldn't listen." Frank didn't look at her. "There's no explaining this away, Karen. I saw it." We all did. Within minutes, the first siren wailed in the distance. The sound shattered the pool's tranquil isolation. It was no longer a private drama. It was a public event, and the world was coming to see it. Parents from nearby houses, drawn by the silence and then the siren, began to appear at the gate. Mrs. Perez, Chloe's mother, was one of the first. She was a small woman with a force field of maternal fury. She pushed past the gate, her face a storm cloud. When she saw the blood on her daughter's leg, a low, guttural wail escaped her throat. She shrieked at Karen. "You monster! What did you do to my daughter?" Karen backed away, the words a fusillade of fire. She wanted to explain, to tell Mrs. Perez that it was a teaching moment, a necessary lesson, but the words wouldn't form. A patrol car arrived, its lights a swirling, chaotic dance of red and blue. The officer, a young man with a tired face and a stern demeanor, took control immediately. He separated the teens, pulling Maya aside first. And then he approached Karen. "Ma'am, put the weapon down slowly," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. Weapon. The word felt too big, too dramatic for her pruning tool. She looked at it. A mundane object that had just torn a hole in reality. Her hand opened, and it clattered to the concrete, the sound unnervingly loud. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of police tape, flashing lights, and the low, tense murmurs of neighbors. The story, a simple disagreement over pool rules, had metastasized into an attempted assault. The teens gave their statements, each one a nail in the coffin of Karen's justification. Maya, her voice steady and clear, recounted the entire event, from the inflatable swan to the chemical test ruse, all the way to Karen's final deranged lunge. She didn't call Karen a miserable hag or an old hag. She simply presented the facts. A powerful account of a woman who had lost all control. The HOA, true to the title's promise, was silent. Mr. Johnson, the president, had rushed to the scene. He had taken one look at the police cars, the paramedics wrapping Chloe's leg, and Karen being placed in the back of a patrol car, and his face had gone white. He had not gone to Karen. He had not gone to Chloe's family. He had retreated into his home, calling an emergency meeting of the HOA board. Their silence was a calculated act of self-preservation. A public statement would be an admission of complicity. They had laughed off Karen's warnings. They had failed to act. Now they were a house of cards, and one wrong word would send them all tumbling. At the station, the fluorescent lights hummed a weary song. Karen sat on a cold metal bench, the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant thick in the air. A detective, a woman with kind eyes and a face that had seen too much, sat opposite her. "Mrs. Henderson," she said gently, "can you tell me what happened at the pool?" Karen took a deep breath. She had rehearsed the words in her head 1,000 times since the patrol car door had closed. They were being disrespectful, breaking the rules. I tried to tell them for their own safety. But they laughed. Her voice was high and brittle like shattered glass. They laughed at me, at the rules, at everything. "So you cut her?" the detective asked, her voice still soft. "It was an accident," Karen insisted, her hands gripping the metal bench. "I just wanted to make a point. To poke a hole in the swan. The rules are the scaffolding, you see. Without them, everything falls apart." The detective nodded slowly, but her eyes held a profound sadness. "Karen, the girl's name is Chloe, not they. She's 14 years old. You didn't poke a hole in a swan. You cut a child." The words struck her, but the truth was a boat that could not land on the shore of her delusion. She saw Chloe's face, not as a victim, but as a tormentor, a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world. Later that evening, after a call to her lawyer, Karen was released on bail, with a strict order to stay away from the pool and the teenagers involved. She walked back into her house, a place of pristine order and meticulous cleanliness, and it felt alien. The silence inside was as oppressive as the silence at the pool. Meanwhile, at Chloe's house, a different kind of storm was raging. The cut had been cleaned, a single stitch placed, and the wound wrapped tightly. But the emotional damage was deeper. Chloe's mother, still shaken, held her daughter close. "I told you that woman was crazy," she wept. Maya and her friends were there, a silent vigil of support. Their easygoing summer had been replaced by a grim reality. They had seen something truly dark, a rage they couldn't comprehend. The pool, once a place of laughter and freedom, was now a crime scene, a monument to a moment of madness. That night, Maya found herself scrolling through her phone, her fingers numb. She found a private Facebook group for Lakeside Estates residents. The gossip was already flying. Some posts defended Karen, calling her a victim of entitled teens. Others condemned her as a psycho. But the official word from the HOA was a blank space, a profound, deafening silence. There were no emails, no phone calls, no statements. The board was in lockdown, trying to manage the public relations fallout without taking an official stance. They were hoping it would all blow over, but it wouldn't. Maya knew it. She looked at a picture she had taken just a few hours before. The garish, inflatable swan, bobbing happily in the water, a stark contrast to the reality she had just witnessed. She knew what she had to do. The adults were silent, so the kids would speak. The battle wasn't over. It had just moved to a new front. That night, as Karen lay in her bed, her heart a frantic drumbeat in the dark, she thought of the pool. It was closed now, a single strand of yellow police tape, a final mocking rule. She had succeeded in making them all take her seriously. But in the process, she had become the very chaos she had fought against. The scaffolding had not been a set of rules. It had been her sanity, and she had just watched it all fall apart. The silence in the Henderson house was as deep and cold as a tomb. Karen moved through it like a ghost, her movements precise and automatic. She had cleaned the kitchen, the living room, and the bathrooms, scrubbing away the ghosts of a day gone horribly wrong. She was a woman in a trance, convinced that if she just returned to her routine, the world would right itself. The police, the paramedics, the screams, they were just a brief interruption. The world, her world, was still orderly. The rules still mattered. She poured herself a glass of iced tea and sat on the back patio, the gentle hum of her neighbor's air conditioner the only sound. She watched a single butterfly land on a rose bush, its wings a delicate, ephemeral pattern against the green. For a single fleeting moment, she felt a sense of peace. This was her world. She built it. She protected it. And no one could take that away. The first crack in her reality came not from a phone call, but from a neighbor's window, Mr. Davison from 2 doors down. A man who usually only offered a brief nod was staring at her, his face a mix of shock and disgust. He quickly pulled his blinds closed, the abrupt scrape of the slats a jarring sound in the quiet afternoon. Karen's brow furrowed. She looked down at her hands, then at her clothes, as if she were the one who was out of place. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again, a frantic, insistent beat. Finally, she picked it up. It was her sister. "Karen, what is going on?" "My God, the things people are saying online." Karen's hands began to tremble. "It's all lies," she said, her voice a thin lie itself. She hung up, a cold knot forming in her stomach. She walked inside, her world beginning to tilt on its axis. She sat on the couch, her hands shaking, and opened her laptop. She didn't have a Facebook account, but she knew the neighborhood had a private community page. She navigated to the public browser page, her fingers fumbling, and typed in Lakeside Estates. The first result was a link to a private group. A banner image showed a serene lake at sunset. She tried to join but was denied. She scrolled down, desperate for a glimpse of the digital world that was turning against her. Then she saw it. A news article from the local paper with a headline that hit her like a punch. "Local woman arrested after pool dispute escalates to assault." Her picture was there. A grainy security image from the gate camera. The comment section below was a cesspool of outrage. "Psycho Karen," one person wrote. "She's been harassing those kids all summer," another added. The words were not just insults. They were a collective scream of judgment, the world calling her a monster. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit clubhouse, the HOA board was in a state of controlled panic. Mr. Johnson, the president, sat at the head of the table, his face ashen. "We have to issue a statement," he said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Something to distance ourselves from this." Distance ourselves? Mrs. Collins, the vice president, a woman who had a small garden of petunias and a large garden of gossip, leaned forward. "This is on us, John. We did nothing." We laughed it off. "We told her to let them have their fun. What are we going to say? Our inaction led to a child being stabbed?" Their phone notifications began to chime. First one, then two, then a dozen, a digital chorus of alarm. A new post had just gone live in the community group. It was from Maya. It was not a rant. It was not a single angry sentence. It was a perfectly structured, emotionally resonant essay, a piece of artful storytelling that laid bare the entire drama from her perspective. The title was simple: "The Laughter Stops Here." Maya's post began with a poignant memory of her friend Ben, Karen's nephew, and her memory of him nearly drowning, framing the story in the very trauma Karen had used as her own shield. She detailed every incident, from the swan to the music, from Karen's bizarre call to Frank to her final terrifying lunge. She didn't call Karen a psycho. She called her a very sad, very angry woman who was failed by the adults who were supposed to help her. She exposed the HOA's complicity, their casual dismissal of Karen's escalating behavior. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked for accountability. The post ended with a simple call to action. We, the teenagers, knew something was wrong. "Why didn't you, the adults?" Below her words was the photo she had taken hours earlier, the inflatable swan, a symbol of harmless fun, floating serenely in the water. The contrast was devastating. It was a digital slap in the face. Mr. Johnson stared at his phone, his face a mask of shock. "Oh, God," he whispered. The kids just went public." The comments came in a torrent. "I was there. It's all true," wrote Ethan. "The HOA has been useless for years," said another resident. The collective voice of the community, once silenced by the HOA's quiet authority, had found its platform. The group, a formerly mundane page of garage sales and lost pets, had become a town hall of outrage. Within the hour, a new post appeared, this one from Chloe's mother, Mrs. Perez. She didn't mince words. She posted a photo of Chloe's stitched leg, the ugly, taut line of a suture a shocking visual. Below it, she announced that she had hired an attorney. "Justice," she wrote, "is no longer an option. It is a requirement." Back at her home, Karen's phone began to ring again, a maddening symphony of reproach. She stared at the screen, a new fear gripping her. This was not the silence she had earned. This was the roar of a world that had not only refused to listen to her, but was now openly, publicly, and violently turning against her. She had wanted to teach them a lesson about consequences, but the lesson was coming for her, and it was going to be a brutal one. The rules she had held so dear, the scaffolding of her life, were not being ignored. They were being used against her one by one. The final blow came in a text message from her lawyer. A new charge had been filed. The police, acting on a phone tip, had discovered a small lockbox in her closet containing several other utility knives. Not just one. This was not an isolated incident. It was a premeditated act. She had planned this. The silence had ended. The rules had been broken, and the world was about to see just how much everything had truly fallen apart. That night, for the first time in years, Karen didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, clutching the phone, reading the hateful comments, the legal threats, the endless vitriol. She had wanted them to stop laughing. They had stopped. But now, in the endless echo of the night, she could hear something else. A whisper growing louder and louder, a collective voice of a community rising up. It was not laughter. It was a judgment, cold and merciless, and it was the sound of her world collapsing. The digital vitriol was a tide that rose higher with every passing hour. Karen's phone was a constant, vibrating source of terror, but she couldn't bring herself to turn it off. Each text, each notification, was a confirmation of her new reality. The world, her quiet, orderly world, had turned against her. Her sister, her closest confidant, had not called back. Instead, she had sent a single devastating text. "Mom says not to talk to you right now. Get a lawyer." The message was a dagger to her heart. Her own family, the very foundation of her carefully constructed life, had abandoned her. Karen's lawyer, a weary man named Mr. Evans, had a voice like sandpaper. He called with a grim update. "The DA is not playing around, Karen. The lockbox, it changes everything. They're upgrading the charge from assault to assault with a deadly weapon. The premeditation claim is strong. And Mrs. Perez's attorney? He's suing the HOA for negligence, and you for everything you've got. Negligence?" Karen's voice was a shocked gasp. "They're the ones who ignored me." "And that, Karen," Mr. Evans said, his voice flat with exhaustion, "is exactly what their lawsuit is based on. The HOA had a duty to act, and they didn't. They're trying to prove they knew you were a threat and did nothing." At the HOA clubhouse, the board meeting was a scene of controlled chaos. Mr. Johnson paced the room, a frantic animal in a cage. "We're being sued. My God, we're being sued by the Perezes. And the press is calling. They want a statement. What do we do?" "We cut our losses, John," Mrs. Collins said, her voice steely. "The public is furious. We have one option. Throw Karen under the bus. We have to show the community we're taking action. We need to be on the right side of this immediately." They voted unanimously to convene an emergency town hall meeting, open to all residents. The official announcement was sent out via email and posted on the community forum. It was a masterpiece of legal doublespeak, a commitment to transparently addressing recent events, and reaffirming our commitment to community safety and well-being. There was no mention of Karen by name, but everyone knew who the meeting was for. Karen's lawyer advised her not to go. "Anything you say can be used against you. Let me handle this." But Karen couldn't stay away. She was being tried in the court of public opinion, and she believed with a desperate, self-destructive certainty that if she could just face them, if she could just explain, they would see her side. She would make them understand her trauma, her rules, her scaffolding. She would be heard. That evening, the clubhouse was packed. The air was thick with tension, a cocktail of fear, anger, and morbid curiosity. The children who had laughed at Karen sat in a front row, a unified front of witness and accusation. Maya and Chloe sat together, Chloe's bandaged leg a stark, silent testament to the events. The rest of the community, the people who had once laughed, or ignored or dismissed Karen, were there, their faces a mix of shame and righteous fury. Mr. Johnson, sweating in his polo shirt, stood at the podium. He delivered a carefully worded opening statement, a bland apology for the unfortunate incident, and an assurance that the board would take all necessary steps to ensure the safety and enjoyment of our shared amenities. He then opened the floor for comments. The first few speakers were angry parents, demanding to know why the HOA hadn't acted sooner. A retired teacher spoke of the decay of civility. Then Maya walked to the podium. She was not a cowering teenager. She was a young woman of poise and conviction. The room fell silent as she began to speak. "My name is Maya, and I am the reason you're all here," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I'm the one who brought the swan, who played the music, who laughed at Karen's rules. I'm not here to say that was right. But I am here to say that what happened at the pool was not just about a rule or a fight or a crazy woman." She paused, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the gazes of her neighbors. "It was about our community. It was about all of us." She spoke of the subtle, escalating conflict, the way the adults had refused to intervene. "We saw a woman who was clearly struggling," she said, her voice tinged with regret, "and we made fun of her. We called her Karen. And you, the adults, you let it happen. You told her to chill out. You told us to have our fun. You all chose to look away, and that choice is what led to my friend getting hurt." Her words were a scalding indictment of the entire community. She didn't just point the finger at Karen. She pointed it at everyone in the room. The silence was absolute. Karen, sitting in the back, felt a rising fury. How dare this child, this laughing, careless child, lecture her on morality? She rose from her seat, her face pale with rage. "You had no right!" she shrieked. "You think this is a joke? You were laughing. You were all laughing at me." The room shifted, murmurs spreading through the crowd. This was not the calm, rational woman they expected. This was a figure of raw, unhinged fury. "I had to make you listen," Karen continued, her voice climbing higher. "The rules are the only thing that matters. Without them, we are nothing. Ben almost drowned because of a broken rule. And no one cared. You don't care now. You just want to save yourselves." Her words, intended to be a defense, were a full, terrifying admission. She was unraveling, her grief and rage finally breaking through the thin veneer of her sanity. Mr. Johnson rushed to the podium, trying to regain control. "Mrs. Henderson, please, we have a process." But it was too late. Karen's rant, her public breakdown, had shown everyone exactly what Maya's words had only implied. The HOA board reconvened immediately in a closed session. There was no debate. The decision was swift and merciless. They returned to the main hall, and Mr. Johnson, his face a grim mask, stood before the community. Due to the extreme nature of the actions taken by a resident, and in accordance with Article 7, Section 2, of our bylaws regarding conduct detrimental to the community, the HOA board has voted to immediately revoke all of Mrs. Henderson's community privileges, including access to the pool, tennis courts, and clubhouse. He paused, a palpable sense of triumph in the air from the crowd. But the hammer had not yet fallen. "Furthermore," he continued, "and with the full support of legal counsel, we are initiating a formal process to compel the sale of Mrs. Henderson's home within 90 days. This is a measure to protect the integrity and safety of our community. We will not tolerate behavior that endangers our residents." The words hung in the air, a final, brutal blow. Karen stood, her mouth open, unable to form a sound. They weren't just taking her pool rules. They were taking her home. The scaffolding she had tried to protect, the physical and emotional structure of her life, was being systematically dismantled. The laughter had stopped. The mockery had ended. But the consequences had only just begun. The drive home from the town hall meeting was a blur of headlights and taillights, a disjointed symphony of fear and disbelief. Karen's world, once a fortress of rules and order, was now a house with no foundation, teetering on the edge of a cliff. They couldn't do this. They couldn't take her home. It was illegal. It was a violation of her rights. The words of the HOA bylaws, once a comfort, were now a weapon wielded against her. Article 7, Section 2, conduct detrimental to the community. They had redefined her pain as a crime. She stumbled through her front door, the scent of fresh-cut flowers and lemon polish a cruel irony. The home she had so meticulously curated, every pillow fluffed, every surface gleaming, now felt like a stage set for a play she was no longer a part of. She walked into the kitchen, the room where she had held the knife, and the memory of that moment was a physical ache. The utility blade, the one she had used to prune the rose bushes, a tool of care, transformed into a weapon of destruction. The phone rang, its jangling sound a fresh wave of panic. It was Mr. Evans, her lawyer. "Karen, I've seen the bylaws. This is bad. They have grounds. The conduct detrimental clause is broad, and in this case, the facts are on their side." "The facts?" Karen's voice was a high, thin wail. "What about the fact they ignored me? What about the fact they let those kids run wild? What about Ben? Did you know a little boy almost drowned in that pool?" "I know," Mr. Evans said, his voice softer but no less firm. "But this isn't about Ben anymore. This is about what you did. This is about a criminal charge and a civil suit. We have to be realistic. They're just trying to save their own skin," she spat. "Of course they are," he said. "And you gave them the perfect out. Your public outburst tonight confirmed everything they needed to prove. You have to stay away from the community. Don't go back to that clubhouse. Don't speak to anyone. I'll handle the paperwork. I'll fight it. But I need you to stay silent." Silence. The very thing she had been fighting against. The word was a betrayal. She hung up without saying goodbye. She spent the night in a feverish state of denial, pacing the house, looking for anything she could use as leverage. She found a copy of the original HOA welcome packet from 10 years ago. It contained the rules, pristine and unblemished. No running on the deck, no glass containers, no pets. All the rules she had so desperately tried to enforce. She clutched the paper to her chest, a useless shield against the storm. The next day, a notice was taped to her front door. It was an official letter from the HOA, the wording stark and final. Notice of intent to compel sale. She tore it off, the paper a brittle thing in her hands. The world, it seemed, was determined to dismantle her life, piece by painstaking piece. That afternoon, driven by a desperate, illogical urge, she found herself at the community lake. It was a small, tranquil body of water, and it was where Ben had nearly drowned all those years ago. The memory was a vivid cinematic horror reel in her mind. A careless teenager, a lost inner tube, a panicked scream, and the sight of her nephew's small, limp body being pulled from the water. Ben had been fine, saved by a quick-thinking lifeguard, but the image had been seared into Karen's soul. It was the genesis of her pool rules, her obsession with order, her righteous crusade against chaos. The memory was the scaffolding of her sanity. She sat on a park bench, her eyes fixed on the water, a glassy surface that held both a quiet beauty and a terrifying history. A young woman approached, her shadow falling over Karen's lap. It was Maya. Karen's heart pounded. "What do you want?" she snapped, a familiar defensiveness rising within her. "I thought you were done with your little show." Maya sat down beside her, a respectful distance away. "I'm not here for a show, Mrs. Henderson. I'm here because I just wanted to see if you were okay." Her voice was soft, laced with a pity Karen found more infuriating than anger. "I'm fine," Karen said, her voice brittle. "I'm not the one who got hurt." "You are," Maya said, her eyes gentle. "In a way." "What you did to Chloe! It came from a place of hurt. I get that now. I just wish I'd understood sooner. Before all of this. She paused. Then her gaze drifted to the lake. My parents lived here back then. My dad was on the HOA board. I remember the day your nephew, Ben, almost drowned. Karen's head snapped towards her. You remember? I was a little girl, Maya said quietly. But I remember it because my dad told me about it. It was the reason they hired a full-time lifeguard for the pool the next summer. He said it was the most important thing they ever did. She looked at Karen, her gaze direct. He said your brother Ben's dad was so grateful. He told my dad that if it wasn't for the lifeguard, Ben wouldn't be alive. He said the lifeguard jumped in before anyone else even realized what was happening. Karen felt a cold, dizzying rush. The lifeguard? No, it wasn't the lifeguard. I was there. My sister-in-law was there. We were all screaming, but no one saw him. It was a hero, a man from the next house over. He jumped in. It was a miracle. Her voice was firm, a fortress of a memory she had built and rebuilt for a decade. Maya shook her head. No, Mrs. Henderson, I'm sorry. The hero was a teenage girl, a babysitter. She was watching some kids, and she was the first one to see Ben. Her name was Jenna. My dad said your sister-in-law went to thank her, but she didn't want any attention. She was just a kid herself. She saved him, a small, insignificant detail. A change of gender. A young babysitter instead of a nameless man. But to Karen, it was a cataclysm. Her entire narrative, the one she had told herself for 10 years, was a lie. Her righteous indignation, her crusade, her grief, it was all based on a false premise. The fear she had nurtured, the anger she had weaponized, had been aimed at the wrong target. The true hero was a teenage girl, a fact she had either forgotten or, worse, deliberately erased, because it didn't fit her narrative of adult neglect and irresponsibility. Her head began to spin. The lake, the bench, Maya's face, everything blurred. The pain of the past was no longer an excuse. It was a ghost, a deception she had clung to. She had fought against a world of careless teenagers, but it was a teenager who had saved her nephew's life. The irony was a physical blow, a stunning revelation that took the air from her lungs. She stood abruptly, her heart pounding a furious rhythm. You're lying, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But the words were weak. She saw the truth in Maya's clear, sad eyes. No, Maya said, her voice full of a genuine sorrow that broke through Karen's defenses. I'm not. You're the one who needs to stop lying. Karen fled, running back to her home. She locked the door, her hands shaking, and stared at the pristine, manicured lawn, the perfect home. It wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a tomb, a monument to a life she had built on a lie. She had wanted to teach them a lesson about consequences. But the greatest consequence of all had been the loss of her own truth, the very scaffolding she had fought so desperately to protect. Justice for her was not an arrest or a lawsuit. It was the revelation that she had spent 10 years fighting the wrong fight, and in the end, she had become the very monster she believed herself to be a martyr against. Her house, her beautiful, perfect house, was nothing but a house of lies.